Excellent. Okay. Great. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Vicky Jacobson, for anybody who doesn't know me. I'm the coordinator of the Refugee Health Network Queensland, and I'm going to be your MC for today's webinar. I'd like to start today's webinar by respectfully acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in which we meet. For me, that is the Yagara and Turrbal people. We acknowledge and pay respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and to elders past, present and emerging for their enduring connection to the land, waters and community. Today, we're going to be launching two documents that have been put together as part of the culmination of the COVID-19 work that the Refugee Health Network Queensland has been doing alongside its partners over the last 2 to 3 years. The first is a guide to effectively engaging with CALD communities based on lessons learnt during COVID-19, along with a companion resource supporting the end learnings from CALD community engagement, the importance of boundary spanning roles. We have 5 speakers, so if you can please hold your questions until the end of the webinar, we should have time for questions at the end. Attendees are welcome to add questions to the chat as we go along, and we'll make sure that the panel answers these during the question time. I'm firstly going to pass over to my colleague, Moraa Nyanchoga. Moraa is originally from Kenya, where she practiced as a GP in various settings, including Kakuma refugee camp based in Kenya. This sparked her interest in refugee health, and she was keen to continue working in this space when she arrived in Australia in 2018 as an international student pursuing her master's in health service management. Moraa has volunteered and worked in various roles in the refugee health space in Queensland. She is a community leader within the Kenyan community in Queensland also, and she is our statewide coordinator for the CHEP project. And today she'll be giving you an overview of CHEP and some of the context to the work being launched today. Welcome, Moraa.
Thanks, Vicky, for the lovely introduction. I'll just take you down a bit of memory lane to just give you a background to how the CHEP started. So, 2020 in the beginning, and we had collective response at that point by working closely with our pre-existing community engagement and partners. With QUT to be able to find out how we could best engage with CALD communities at that point. Mid-2020, we had our partners coming together to co-design what's now known as CHEP, that's the CALD COVID Health Engagement Project, and it began officially at the end of 2020, and it was extended in 2021 to have a Southeast Queensland, and ended up being extended in 2021 to have a statewide reach. Next, please. So just an overview of what the aim of CHEP is, with our communities across Queensland to be able to have that reciprocal engagement, and also work with our service providers to have appropriate services to our communities, as well as appropriate health information to be able to overcome the pandemic at that point. Our partners, equity, community development, and capacity building, both from that community perspective as well as the government perspective. As mentioned before, driven initiative, and you can see the list of our partners down below the PowerPoint, and our key partners really work hard. Next slide, please. The next slide really will be about giving an overview of what CHEP did in terms of engagement. So we did have an established community representatives across Queensland, and the steering group was made up of our community service partners in order to inform the strategic direction of the project. We did take a couple of information sessions in various platforms, as well as in various sessions in language, our partners, as well as bicultural workers. We also worked with our service providers to build vaccination hubs in places that were accessible and culturally appropriate to our communities, for example, in community centers across Queensland. We also worked with our partners and communities to COVID resources in language as well as in plain English and able to share them in different platforms. Some of the other resources that were co-developed by community involved slide deck that had some key information during COVID. This was also regularly updated with our partners. We also had resources in various formats, audios and videos, and we were able to share that in different platforms, including our WhatsApp. A key initiative in CHEP was the Flexi Funding project that was able to the Flexi Funding projects that were really community-led initiatives that were led by our communities in different parts of Queensland, enabled to improve that access to health information in language as well as accessing health services in ways that were appropriate for our communities. One of the key parts of CHEP was to alongside QUT, and we had our community members working as peer researchers, all from the regional areas as well as the metro areas. We were able to have that peer research model, and we were able to have our full evaluation. And I think one of the other key things that we're going to focus today, the regional engagement guides, is we wanted to be able to capture slow down a bit, and CHEP officially finished in late last year in December, but we wanted to really capture those lessons learned for future crises as well as have those shared values and principles in how we can engage our community today. So I'll hand over back to Vicky for the next steps as well. Thanks.
Thanks so much for that, Moraa, and apologies. I know Mora's sound seemed to be dropping in a little bit in and out then, so we can we'll try and rectify that for the recording. Moraa, I just have to say, it has been a pleasure working with you on this project, and so I think hopefully as we move into the next phase, we will continue to do exciting things together. And I now have the pleasure of introducing Anna Jones. Anna is the leader of the Cairns African Association and a member of the CHEP Community Reference Group. She's also a current member of the Multicultural Queensland Advisory Council. Anna has a public health and education background. Her wide-ranging experience includes working in refugee camps throughout Africa and being a school-based speech and language assistant. She holds a master's in development administration and planning from the UK and has worked in a variety of roles, such as on the sexual health strategy at Queensland Health, assisting with speech and language support at Education Queensland, and held research positions at James Cook University and Griffith University. Anna is a co-founder and current director of the Maisha Bora program, which addresses wellbeing and integration for resettled refugees in far north Queensland. We've asked Anna to come along today and share her reflections as a community leader engaging with services and systems. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you very much. Thank you so very much for having me. What a glorified introduction. So, I guess one of the things I wanted to share is my reflection on engaging with communities and systems. And what I can say from the African community is that engaging with the community and systems during the COVID-19 pandemic brought to light quite several reflections. Firstly, it became apparent that true community engagement did involve and continues to involve listening to the needs and concerns of the community and actually actively involving them in the decision-making process, and not just an email or a tokenism meeting, but actual engagement. We've been very fortunate here in far north Queensland because we have that authentic engagement and partnership, which requires that mutual understanding of the goals and objectives of each of the communities involved. Open communication and transparency. We have Centacare, who have by extension QPAT and Refugee Health Network, and they have brought together so many stakeholders in this process. So we are very fortunate. I guess the next thing I would like to say is what this authentic engagement means to me. And what I can say is that the partnering and co-designing, which are quite vital components of this authentic engagement in partnership. Within the African community, we were involved in co-designing and partnering, which meant that the members were actually actively involved in not only developing, but also implementing and evaluating the programs and services which directly affect their lives. And they continue to receive the support and the updates and having somebody to listen to them when they had the questions. This approach is often recognized. It provides the knowledge, experience, and expertise to the communities to be able to bring something to the table. And I have particular mention of the Refugee Health Network team at the CCHEP who were involving us in consultation meetings and what steps they were going to next, which made the community members feel valued and listened to. Now, there is the question of how we can be able to sustain something good. How can we sustain something good like this? Now, sustaining something good, which came out of what we were experiencing with COVID-19, will require the same continued commitment and authentic engagement and partnership, being evident and essential to recognize that the importance of community members' voices and actively involving them in the process and giving them feedback and helping them make decisions to actually inform the process. This is the only way, I guess, which can bring a kind of a sustainability to all the good work which has been done so far. And I would like to add that we need to continue fostering this ongoing relationship and building that trust between organization, government, and community members to help maintain the success we have achieved so far, especially during the COVID-19. I mean, you just have to look at the keywords in the tree of empowerment model in the research paper. It's just a flow of information, and that is all that is necessary. From the perspective of the African community, I think the other things which I would say are important is the work that made a huge difference to the African community and outcomes. Firstly, the importance of culturally appropriate messaging. The communication cannot be overstated. Having the messages in a language and using everyday people to actually deliver those messages was actually a godsend for the African community in particular. It made the message so much easier to digest, and not just information, you need to do this, you need to do the other, but actually having it in a language and a person who they can relate to. This really did provide, I believe, to some extent and to a bigger extent, the information in different multiple languages, using those culturally relevant channels of communication to help reach a wider and extensive and diverse audience. And the second point is the partnership and bringing people from the community organization, bringing people from the healthcare providers and government agencies. You know, instead of myself, for example, being a leader, having to reach out to the government agencies or having to reach out to the health providers. Again, I said we were so fortunate because we had a central point of information, Centacare, who were calling these agencies and health providers and actually helping coordinate the care for the individuals and for the families who were affected quite dramatically by COVID-19, especially the recent arrivals. They just arrived a year ago, and then COVID hit. So for them having this central point, for me having that central point was quite useful. Having those connections, having a central point. The collaboration was much better by actually bringing all those resources and services together. It's reduced the health disparities and improved the health outcomes. I mean, to sum up, what I can say is that engaging with the community, engaging with the systems during the COVID highlighted the importance of that authentic engagement and partnership. Co-designing the programs and partnering with the African community, being the example here, it just showed that it can lead to a more effective and culturally appropriate program and services, which went on to sustain the successes achieved during the pandemic. And it will require, yes, ongoing commitment and willingness to continue listening to community members' voices by continuing to prioritize that authentic engagement and partnership. You just have to look at the triangle, which is in place in the research paper, and exactly how it works. And we need to continue working towards building a healthier and more resilient communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. It's such a key message for all the services to consider in the work that we do, because engagement and authentic sort of partnerships is really the only way that we can ever achieve what we want to achieve, is working together. Our next speaker and the author of the guide that we're launching today was raised in North Queensland and is a first-generation Sri Lankan Australian. Andrea Obeyesekere sorry, Andrea, I said that wrong, is the manager of Multicultural Services Centacare, Far North Queensland, overseeing the refugee and migrant settlement services, the CALD community engagement and diverse employment and training programs. Andrea is admitted to the Supreme Court of Queensland and the High Court of Australia as a solicitor, with over 18 years experience working with students and families from a range of diverse backgrounds in both regional and remote Queensland and in the United Kingdom. Andrea is well known across Queensland for her work in the CALD sector. She is the chair of the FNQ Regional CALD Community Leaders Network, the chair of the Far North Queensland Refugee Health Network, and the CALD leader for the Cairns Social Services Alliance. Recently, her team received national recognition for women empowerment programs, COVID-19 resilience programs, and state and local recognition for diverse employment and training programs. Andrea is also a mother of 3 wonderful children, I believe. She has assured me of so. Gabrielle, Eliza, and Raphael, and together with her husband, Wayne, is proud to call Cairns home. So as you can see, she was the perfect person for CHEP to engage as we looked to better understand how regional engagement occurs and what we can all learn from that. I'll hand over to Andrea.
Thanks very much, everyone. Vicky, thank you for that introduction. It was too kind, I think, but I will continue on, and thank you also to Anna, who gave a wonderful summary of what happened up here in Far North Queensland, and they were huge partners of us here. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm deeply grateful for your presence here today as we virtually launch the Queensland CALD Community Engagement Framework. I want to pay my respects firstly to the Gimai Wallabara Yidinji people, the traditional owners of the land upon which I am today, and all elders of the respective areas where we gather, and to our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues who join us across the state today. We are blessed today and always to meet on your land. Since almost 12 months ago, the CHEP team approached me to lead a collaborative statewide research project capturing the lessons from COVID-19 for our sector. Despite the challenges of a very busy schedule here in Far North Queensland and very uncertain economic climate here for us, our team at Centacare Multicultural Services have supported me in taking on this important opportunity. I'm grateful, many of them are online today, for their unwavering encouragement and often frank and sometimes too honest feedback on the tools we were developing, and for their contributions. I'd also like to thank my colleague, Dr. Paul Schmidt, who always champions the regions, and who wrote about the importance of the boundary spanning roles, which is the accompaniment to this document. Today, I'm about to share with you a glimpse of the experience of the journey, so I'm not going to rehash everything that is in the document, but I hope it will provide some insights on what we have gathered throughout the project. So the project goal was to create a culturally appropriate guide that responds effectively to the needs of the communities across Queensland during the pandemic and for future crises. I admit the task was somewhat overwhelming, given that I'm not a health expert, but I was assured that exploring the task from a community engagement approach was what was needed. The task was exciting, a real opportunity to share our frontline experiences and show the importance of an interwoven approach to economic, health, and social policy, and for the regional voice and perspectives to sit alongside that of the metro areas and to be considered, for the regional voice to really have a voice at the table, which was really exciting for us. So if we look at what we did, we put together a think tank, and the guide was developed through the valuable guidance and input of 13-member think tank representing 6 regions in Queensland, and you can see them there on the slide. The think tank met virtually 4 times to share their experiences approaches, and reflections. I had the privilege of interviewing each member using a timeline tool to capture their COVID-19 journey. I'd like to express my gratitude to the think tank members for their contributions. They were raw, they were real, and they were heartfelt. I'd like to acknowledge Selena, Jody, Nancy, Rachel, Ursula, Andrea, Troy, Kevin, Tra, Stephanie, Susan, Kerry, Jamila, and Kenny, all for their generous input. Through literary and resource research, through think tank discussions, the individual regional experience capture, a toolkit development, and a guide development, we were able to create digital resource that can be a living document. You can see through the project timeline that it took some time, and it took a lot of time for reflection. May I add that a lot of us got COVID through the process. So that also added an extra incentive to get this underway. I want to express my gratitude to the CHEP team and the Refugee Health Network for their support. I hope that people from the sector and across the state and CALD communities themselves will continue to contribute to the case studies and the tools. Our common shared reflection through this process was around defining CALD and for a better and deeper understanding of CALD beyond what was just language barriers. Through the project, we explored the importance of a deeper understanding of cultural protocol, cultural sensitivity, and cultural acceptance in engagement approaches. We found that the most effective engagement across Queensland was engagement that built community confidence, and that was premised by a willingness for two-way dialogue, active listening, and a willingness to be flexible with approaches. As you can see on your screen now is the triangle of trust, which was one of the guides or the models that we developed. Extensive consultation with all the think tank members and with numerous community leaders identified that the themes for building better community outcomes were engagement, empathy, empowerment, and trust. And trust is particularly important for building relationships with CALD communities, as it fosters that mutual understanding, respect, and effective communication. So we created what we call the triangle of trust. And it's a pictorial model that references the strength-based concept of empowering individuals and communities by identifying and building on their strengths, resources, and capabilities. This approach promotes sustainable outcomes by focusing on its strengths rather than challenges and limitations. The triangle is the strongest shape and serves as a reminder of the importance of strength-based practice across the sector. Absolutely, trust is a crucial component for effective community engagement. In addition to acknowledging the diversity of community, it's important to make sure that they feel safe, valued, and welcomed into dialogue on an equal platform. This is especially evident during the pandemic, where rapid developing science and ever-changing policies made building trust even more challenging. By prioritizing trust-building efforts, organizations and communities did work together very successfully to achieve better outcomes and create a more sustainable future. So what has just come up is what we really wanted to emphasize, which was empowerment. And what we tried to do was use something that reflected the storytelling, the sharing, and the way CALD communities communicated. So we created the tree of empowerment. Empowerment was a key area of further development in this guide. Along with trust, it was discussed at length and expanded upon by each of the think tank members and commented upon by a range of community leaders across the state. The COVID-19 pandemic highlighted the importance of building strong relationships with communities rather than just handing out information. The Tree of Empowerment was created to capture the concept of empowerment, which consists of 4 stages. So we start at the bottom, and that's the root stage, which involves two-way dialogue to update the community of what is known and to listen, actively listen to their experiences. In the trunk stage, the dialogue expands to explore further commonality, allowing for the exchange of ideas and support. And then we have the branches stage. Here, the community is welcomed into a partnership and receives advocacy and the resource support they need. The leave stage is where communities take the lead and are asked how they can be supported. So we take a back step, providing an opportunity for continued sustainable growth. So the project team believes that by following the stages of engagement, it is hoped that we can create a solid foundation for empowerment and work towards a more sustainable future. It is my hope that the case studies and toolkits, which can be found online, will be useful for many individuals and organisations. The case studies offer frontline accounts of experiences that redefined considerations and approaches and provided valuable insights into community engagement. The toolkits provide models of engagement and address both sector and community well-being, which were the key areas discussed during the intensive consultations. It is hoped that by utilising these resources, individuals and organisations can work towards creating a more sustainable outcome and building stronger relationships with their communities. The importance of trust and understanding the diversity of communities cannot be overstated, and it is only through strong relationships and effective communication that we can work towards achieving better outcomes for all. With a commitment to building these partnerships, we can create a more sustainable and equitable future for everyone in Queensland. And so thank you. And may I finally say this experience personally made me very, very proud to be a Queenslander, something I thought I would never say outside of the state of origin at rugby league time. But the strength of our state is definitely and clearly in our people. I hope this work has adequately captured their passion, their hearts, and their resilience, as we have always known, but we often tend to forget. So I hope this is a reminder that the people always have the answers. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. It was beautiful. And thank you for all your hard work and for all the work you do in Far North Queensland and beyond across the state. Our third speaker today is Julie McDougall. She is the Director of Multicultural Affairs in the Department of Children, Youth Justice and Multicultural Affairs. She has, sorry, we just had some audio in the background. She's held previous roles in housing and in the community sector, working with people from disabilities and their families. Julie was Multicultural Affairs representative on the steering group for CHEP and was integral in connecting various parts of government and CALD communities during CHEP, but also within her regular work. Julie's going to talk to us today and give us perspective from the government on how this approach has worked. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you very much, Vicky. Before I go any further, I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we're meeting and pay my respects to elders past and present. I'm delighted to say a few words about this wonderful work and the benefits and learnings for government. I think this work and the legacy pieces being launched today are a fabulous example of community leaders, non-government sector and government working together in a true and equitable partnership founded on deep listening, trust, respect, and a willingness to be agile, flexible, and responsive. I think each partner had a key role to play, none greater or lesser than the other, a level playing field, as it were, with all elements essential to the project's success. I think COVID represented a time when critical government messaging needed to reach the whole community for personal safety, for family safety, and for community safety. And to reach community, to really reach community, government must speak and engage in a way in which the whole community can hear and understand. And this can only occur when working through and with trusted partners who most importantly have the trust of the community. So my key linkages in my role were with the CHEP project and the Australian Red Cross Community Connector role, which supported messaging out and also information in, so that government could adapt and change quickly, not something we're renowned for, to meet community need. And the role of a boundary spanner has been much talked about in this work, and boundary spanners must exist in government. And I think this project demonstrates that funding models that support boundary spanners, connectors, facilitators is critical to success. As a representative of government and as a partner in this project, some of the messages I see for government are: get out of the way, but be an enabler. Be prepared to act and connect within and across government if there are barriers impacting on the work. Make the connections, have the conversations, build understanding, and bring people together. There is nothing like storytelling or seeing things firsthand to build the bridge that spans the divide. I think it was important in some of our government roles to make other government partners aware of gaps and duplication, and to be flexible in funding models, to be agile, to adapt, and to advocate, and to be creative, and not just do things the way things have always been done, because that's the way things have always been done. Important to back the utilisation of community knowledge and expertise with flexible funding. And always, always be quiet and listen and listen and listen some more, and then be prepared to act when that's needed. So we did this during COVID. It is possible, and we can and should keep doing our business in this way. Thanks very much, Vicky.
Thank you, Julie. And I have to say, it's been a pleasure working with Multicultural Affairs in this project. It is lovely seeing, and health as well, government getting behind initiatives like this. It really was make or break, and it was really lovely to see Queensland Health step up and fund CHEP so that it could exist, and for Multicultural Affairs to walk right alongside in funding the community connector roles. I think that the two departments worked really, really well on making this actually possible. Finally, I'd like to introduce Dr. Paul Schmidt, who was the author of the Guide's companion resource, Supporting and Learning from CALD Community Engagement, the Importance of Boundary Spanning Roles. Paul was engaged by Refugee Health Network Queensland as a consultant to investigate the governance settings of the COVID pandemic in Queensland, and in particular, the roles supporting CALD community engagement. During much of the pandemic phase of COVID, he worked as the Community Connector Advisor with the Australian Red Cross, working collaboratively with the CHEP team. Paul has more than 30 years of experience working in cross-cultural disaster resilience, community development projects in Victoria, Queensland, Ecuador, and Nepal. His research and practice interests focus on the way government and non-government organisations can work together to build resilient communities and tackle complex issues such as natural disasters, and it turns out pandemics. is currently working at Communify as the coordinator of the Multicultural Affairs funded Asylum Seeker and Refugee Assistance Program. Over to you, Paul.
Thanks, Vicky. And hi, everyone. Great that you can come to this launch today. I'm calling in from Jagera land in southwest Brisbane, and also want to pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded. I'm going to go back, Julie, and listen to your recording. That was such a great summary of the experiences that were shared with me in bringing this guide up, in terms of the way your department and Queensland Health really worked through this pandemic phase of COVID. So today I'm going to be talking about the guide that has been developed that sits alongside as a companion resource with the work that Andrea developed with the think tank. And so you've been hearing today about this model of CALD engagement. Many of you were involved in it across Queensland. That really was about dialogue, co-design, very flexible and agile. And this guide is about the roles that sat behind that direct community engagement work. So how can these boundary spanning roles connect good community engagement with decision making in government? So I want to thank the 18 practitioners that I consulted as part of this work, and people that reviewed early drafts. I spoke to people working at all levels of government, local through to federal, and people involved with, yeah, not quite yet, Vicky, but we're getting there. And people involved with multicultural and health sector. If you look at the guide, we won't go into the detail today, but you'll see the idea of this boundary spanning role is people that are working across different systems. They might be based in government, NGOs or community, but they're working across different systems and even between sectors. And so it's really interesting to see how those people worked and how they achieved such great outcomes in Queensland. Some of you might know that people outside of Queensland were looking at the work that we did, and we were often leading the way in terms of involvement at the community level and connecting that right through into government. So if you look at the next slide, within the guide, there's a few sections on the considerations for people that are wanting to support that sort of co-design and dialogue model in the community level, and what sort of principles did they use to do that work. In particular, I wanted to circle back. Andrea mentioned the central role of trust in terms of working with community, CALD communities. And if you listen, Julie also mentioned the word trust, and that came through in all my consultations. Often we talk about CALD communities, trust is really important. Well, these consultations showed that trust is equally important for government and for NGOs. So government need to have those trusted relationships. People doing boundary spanning work need to trust and collaborate with each other. And so trust is really central through all these work. In the guide, we go into some of the different roles played by people doing boundary spanning work and tools and strategies that they use. And if you look at the next slide, when we talked to those 18 people and got a bit of a list of all the different tools and strategies they were using across COVID, we actually used a modified version of the timeline tool that Andrea did for her resource. So picking up some similar things along the way. And all those strategies and tools fall into these 5 sort of functions, if you like. And even though a single person might not have been playing all of these functions, people in boundary spanning roles tended to network together, and between them they were playing these roles, and they were able to really work on this idea of systems change, supporting CALD community engagement, and also feeding back community voice and the results of community engagement back to decision makers. So in the guide, there's a range of examples. It was a lot of fun to hear people's stories. There's an example in the linking section about Mora's role, the statewide CHEP coordinator role, and some of the process that she went through in terms of what does it mean to reach out and link with the regions in an authentic way, recognising all the work and all the local networks that are going on at that level, and how can someone at the state level really support and amplify that role and continue in that empowerment approach. There's the example of the Urgent Comms WhatsApp group as a model of, again, linking different networks in a way that respects the networks that are in place. And if you look in the enhancing section, there's mention of the Flexi Fund that Moraa also referred to, and that model. And I encourage you to look at Bridget Abell's evaluation of the CHEP project, and she goes into a lot of good detail in terms of that model, in terms of how can state level roles provide resourcing to local communities and really respect the way local communities know how this engagement should happen. On the next slide, you'll see this photo. This came up again and again, and I don't want to give anyone PTSD trigger anything, but just the way COVID would change, the way unexpected things would happen, the levels of uncertainty, but also in positive ways, the way community capacities change, the sorts of supports that community asked for at the start of COVID. They were doing most of that independently later on. And so the need for people playing boundary spanning roles to keep checking in with community, with people like Andrea, working in communities to make sure that we're continuing to empower and meet people where they're actually at. So as part of that, in the feedback section, you'll also see this importance of getting feedback, getting community voice to strategic places. Of course, state government was really important, but there were also people at the federal level that boundary spanners were working with, and making sure that they knew about the impact of national decisions on people like asylum seekers and international students. And it's really interesting to see the way these boundary spanning roles linked across the whole federal system and right down into local government. If you go to the next slide, the report ends with some key recommendations, and Julie summed a lot of it up really well, actually. And also, more in her presentation mentions the real importance of those pre-existing trusted relationships, just the importance for government and decision makers to have and maintain trusted relationships as part of the assets that they need to do their job. Most people that I spoke to talked about that in a lot of ways, responding to COVID was about working with the networks that were there and just supporting them to grow and adapt as they needed to, but also the importance of designing some boundary spanning roles to assist with agility, to assist with filling any gaps. And that was a really important focus for government looking forward and planning for any future disasters. And finally, I just want to end with circling back to some of the points that Anna raised. This need to continue with authentic partnerships with CALD communities, that CALD leaders are calling for us who work in partnership with them to not return to pre-COVID levels of engagement, but to continue on and revisit what does it mean to have authentic partnerships. The final section in the draft, in the report, talks about embedding, and that's really the stage that we're at now. And there's a few examples of some really encouraging signs here in Queensland, and I look forward to accompanying all of you as we pursue some of those opportunities into the future. Thanks, Vicky.
Thank you so much, Paul. Your knowledge and expertise in this area has been a great asset to Queensland, and we certainly put it to use during the COVID response. I'd now like to open up to questions. Does anyone have any questions for the panel of speakers today? You can either type it in, or if you're brave, you can raise your hand. while everyone has a little bit of a think, I just wanted to thank you all for joining us today. We hope that you found the guide and companion resource helpful in informing how we can all engage with CALD communities in a meaningful way now and into the future. All the resources are available online now. We will share this information after the session, but Ali has also popped the link in the chat for everyone to find now. We have been recording and we will put that on our website so that that'll be available for anyone who wasn't able to come along today. They can access it. Thank you so much to Andrea and Paul for all of your hard work in putting these documents together. I know that it has been potentially a labor of love and of hate sometimes in the wee hours of the night, but we really appreciate all of the work that you've done, and to all of the CHEP team, your ongoing support in this is what makes it possible, along with all of our partner organisations, the steering group and the reference group members, the think tank members, and all of the community representatives who've contributed to this body of work as we've gone along. Okay, so we've got a couple of questions.
Anna's got a question.
Oh,
Vicky.
beautiful. Pull yourself off mute. Thanks, Anna.
No, it's okay. Well, my question is actually to the team that put together this research, and it's amazing. So please, congratulations for the work. I'm sure it was not always a bed of roses. I know to be partners with the organizations was not always a bed of roses. However, I think it has given us that mutual respect and trust, and to be culturally appropriate in engaging with the communities and not just the African community. My question is, well, just a backdrop. I have and always will advocate for migrants and resettled refugees, and the services in place and staff members need to understand the fundamental priority for engaging and listening to communities. And this is not just for help, but also for education, especially adult education, and also initial entry and welcoming process. My question is whether the team would be looking at another research paper, maybe highlighting the same models, which can be now the model you have can be a catalyst, for example, for putting in place similar models for adult education, being one of the key areas that need consultation with communities. Not wanting to open a can of worms.
Thanks, Anna. I'm not sure if any of the panel want to answer any of those questions. I guess just to fill everybody in, CHEP in its status within the health sphere has been kindly funded by the Queensland Health Strategic Communications Branch for 9 months this year to assist with helping shore up their communications and engagement strategy for working with multicultural communities. So that piece of work is happening, but I can see where you're looking towards areas outside of health as well. And I think that hopefully this is beginning that conversation and we can start to engage further services. I can see that Andrea and Paul and Moraa all have their hands up. Let's start with Moraa.
Thanks, Vicky. Thanks, Anna, for those comments. I think I just wanted to comment from a logistics or operational perspective during CHEP. I think it was quite great to work with all the sectors outside of health. We worked with employment, we worked with education. I think there was a bit of crossover. Just as an example, I think there was a time, I think in early last year when it was going back to school and there was need for translated resources for the community. So we had to work closely with, Queensland Education as well. And particularly in employment, we worked closely with the Pacifica communities, particularly the seasonal workers. So from that operational perspective, I think there's quite some linkages and working together intersectoral, but I think hopefully from the evaluation and these guides will have those transferable models and learnings for engagement in other sectors. And I think hopefully Paul and Andrea can cover that up as well based on their consultation.
Thanks, Moraa. Andrea?
Yes, I just hope, I think what Anna spoke of is really important. And I think Queensland Health need to be commended for funding this project and for actually listening to the voice of people. I think what Anna is is emphasizing is the frustration of community who speak about their experiences and their needs around a range of topics, ones that directly affect their settlement, such as employment and education, and yet they're listened to only for the purpose of ticking a box and completing a consultation process. Because from the beginning of time, people have had good ideas, very good and reasonable ideas that can get off the mark and start seeing a change for adult education and employment. And employment is particularly important at the moment, where we need a skilled labour force very quickly, and we have a housing crisis where we can't bring people in. There are solutions within the community, and the community are speaking. And it shouldn't matter where they're speaking from. Again, regional voice, because often regional experiences have had to deal with smaller resources, pooling resources together and working with multiple different sectors to get an outcome. So I think what Anna raises is really important, and I hope this model will speak of the power of listening, deeply listening to community voice.
Thanks, Andrea. And quickly, Paul, with your follow-up comments as well.
Yes, I'll just draw your attention, people, if you look at section 3.1 in the boundary spanning guide, talks about linking. And so from a boundary spanning perspective, looking at other sectors, the first step would be to look at the governance of that sector and how it's put together. So a few people have asked me about education over the last few weeks, and just to note that it's structured very differently than health, but definitely the issues that are and the tools that are in both of these guides can be applied into that. But the way that you would design a strategy is very different, and happy to talk to people that are interested in those applying these lessons into other sectors and what that might mean for linking community and community engagement with decision makers.
Thanks so much, Paul. I'm just going to go over to Melanie to make a comment now.
Thanks, Vicky, and fantastic work to everyone. Congratulations to all those involved, and thank you for your efforts in pulling this together. It's really amazing just to see what happened written up, I think. So I'd just like to thank you all for committing to that and pulling these resources together. I just had a couple of comments to make. I think one of the things that is kind of required for government to work effectively in this space is a bit of humility. As government, we don't often like to not have the answers. So when we do engage, often it's with a preconceived idea of what the answer should be. But with CHEP, I think there was a genuine sense we don't have the answer, and we need to actually acknowledge that. And when you do authentically engage with the community and stakeholders, it's okay for government to say that it doesn't have the answers and it wants to talk to you to work out what to do. And I think that's a really kind of big leap that we were forced into over COVID, but I haven't seen in government for a really long time. The other thing is just the importance of giving the time. So you've mentioned all the conversations and the spanning roles. That actually takes an investment in people to have conversations and time to have conversations. And it's almost a flip from we'll just throw funding at this and it will produce something, to actually invest in the time and resources needed to have those conversations. And I think that actually leads to potentially really efficient use of funding when you do use it. So yeah, they were just some comments on my thoughts from what you've presented.
Thanks, Mel, and thanks again to you and your team, who really were one of the absolute essential key components to CHEP's success. There are a couple of questions in the chat that I might just read out. Alham was wondering, oh, sorry, it's just moved away. How do you ensure that all parts of the community are involved, as often communities are made up of many groups? Any takers? Maybe Andrea?
Sorry, I was trying to find my hand raising button. Yeah, that was a really good question. It was one that we explored with a number of people and a number of the different regions that we were working with. Some of the tools that have been developed is about looking at trust within the community itself. So within the CALD community itself and who's providing the information. It is a difficult one to look at, but I think it's having that broad understanding. And I think Anna summed it up when she was talking about the fact of when you're engaging, if you've built trust within your workplace of people that are from that community, they have an understanding of the factions between a community, what is happening within a community, and how many people you should be speaking within a community. It's not enough to just go to one leader. Often a lot of the community frontline services that we spoke to went to places where community was meeting so that there was more than one representative they were consulting from a community. So these were different things that are explored in the tools that are accompanying the resource. But I agree, it's very tricky and a difficult place to be in. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Andrea. We have a question from Naomi. Was there anything in particular that worked well in supporting decisions to be made quickly and in a way that everyone felt heard? Oh, Paul.
I'll just say a couple of quick comments and then probably throw to Andrea for the community level side of this. In terms of amongst groups of stakeholders, we found that pre-planning how you were going to respond to particular issues was really important, particularly people working above the community engagement level, what was the best way for us to respond. We also used a modified model of the disaster management cycle to think about what was happening with COVID and what might happen next and how can we respond to that. And the whole way through thinking about, well, what is community saying, speaking to Andrea and other community leaders and really letting that be the lead back to government. Thanks, Andrea.
Vicky, I guess from my perspective, central coordination, providing some opportunity for community to speak directly with decision makers rather than it coming from myself or coming from a service. So creating those opportunities where community could speak directly and provide those raw what's happening on the ground. What are the challenges we are facing, rather than it being filtered through a service, was incredibly important. And that was something that every region was committed to, of making sure that community had an opportunity to speak directly to decision makers rather than the services speaking on their behalf. And I think that's very, very important in the future as well.
Thanks so much, Andrea. I totally agree. Also, I would say one of the things that definitely made it easier was our very large partnership group, which meant that we could very quickly snowball things because there's definitely no way one organisation can manage this on their own. It is everybody working with their little piece of the puzzle to make it a complete picture in the end. I think that might be it for the moment, and we're right on 1:30. So I want to thank everybody for their time and for our wonderful speakers today, our funders and everybody else in the room. If you have any ongoing questions, please feel free to email us at the network. If you have resources that you think you'd like added, as Andrea said, she really wants this to be a living document, and we're very happy to look at suggestions for other guides and tools and resources that can be added to this. So please let us know if you have something that's been valuable in your workspace that you'd like to share for others to benefit from. Thank you, everybody. We'll let you go.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.